Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Dan Gay, Chief Marketing Officer of BlockCerts Blockchain, and we're here live with the world from here with another exciting thing that we're going to talk about. And I'm here joined with Mr. Tim Vasco, the founder of BlockCerts Blockchain. Good morning to you there, Tim.
How you doing, Dan? Great to be here, as always, on World From Here. We're going to talk about AI fears and banks and fakes and news and frauds and all that stuff. And hey, you know what? The day of the DAO is here.
The day of the DAO is here. And you also say the day of the Tao in our vernacular.
The Tao and the DAO are the same thing. The TAO, or the DAO as it's pronounced in China, is the essence of all things. And so what we talk about at BlockCerts is DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations, for anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, that happen and can happen on blockchain, and TAOs, or TAOs, which is pronounced DAO, so it gets a little confusing, but it's the Trust Autonomous Organization. And the thing that is curious about all this, and this is what we're going to talk about, is give some examples of where the world's at today and where it's headed. This is the world from here, right?
Right. And it really is changing the landscape, too, of contracts. We've seen that in our business, and it's pretty exciting what's happening.
Everything. And news and fake news and all this stuff. And the idea of what AI is going to be. We're getting people saying, oh, it's so scary. And I think, well, it's scary or it's super exciting, and what a great time to be alive, to be part of forming what this future looks like. And, using these things and reflecting on what's going on right now is probably the most exciting thing ever. I mean, it's just amazing. We can just dive right in and talk about how all this stuff is now prepared to use these technologies and these tools and these DAOs, or TAOs, if you want, Trust Autonomous Organizations, to make sure that, yes, we're in control and we know what's going on out there.
Yeah, and just to relate that, it was probably scary when you're on your horse and buggy and you see a Model T drive by. It's just another evolution. And it's an evolution that's really needed, and that's what we're going to talk about. Is as you said, fakes, fears, fake news, frauds, etc.
And Dan, it's a tool. It's a tool set. Yeah. And the thing about AI that people forget, they don't actually understand, is it doesn't create anything. It mimics everything. So these are all based on what are called LLM, or large language models. And it's been around since the 50s. But what's happened today is processing power is much faster. We have all this content automatically already tagged through all these years of creating all this data and this content. And it's just simply assembling things that sound like it's coming up with unique stuff, because we as humans that have put all this stuff in sound like, and we do come up with unique stuff.
Right.
But the problem is, what's real, what's fake, what's generated by an AI engine can look very, very, very unique, but it's not. It's a mimic of a bunch of stuff put together.
Yeah, and just last World From Here, we talked about the need for authentication, which we're going to talk about that again today, and why that's such a critical component of AI and what we do in the future.
Well, authentication is the foundation of all this. So we call it at BlockCerts Authenticated Intelligence instead of artificial ignorance. And, AI has to be authenticated intelligence. And we'll talk about that when we look at some examples. But let's look at some of these examples of, for example, what's going on right now. What just happened in this idea of fake news and, influencing. And it was Fox News. That wasn't AI. News. That's people.
Yeah, just this week, two different individuals, two different networks, but Fox News for sure. with Tucker Carlson.
Well,
and getting caught up in his texts and emails, and I'm pretty sure management was not too happy with the criticism he had, but also the followers and
let's look at what it led to. Okay, so the first thing is they got sued for $1.6 billion by Dominion Voting, and Dominion Voting is saying, hey, that was not real. Now, in a very, very quick time, the Fox News network settled for $787.5 million. So roughly half of the lawsuit. And, why did they settle if they were right? They weren't, right?
Right.
And the whole Tucker Carlson thing that came out was, here's a guy who was inflammatory to the management, to the, people who were saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't say that. Maybe we shouldn't, call Biden the winner of the election and so forth. So all of that's going on behind the scenes, but out there in front of the world, the viewers didn't see that.
No.
All they saw was what was being reported. There you go. That's human version of taking what actually was happening and modeling it in a way that their viewers, that the Fox News viewers, audience, got what they wanted to hear. That's what AI does. So,
right.
My dad always used to say, figures lie and liars figure.
Wise man.
Right? And that's exactly what's going on here with this idea of fake news. And that's happened in elections. Dan, it happened. We all seem to forget this is 2023. Right. And in 2016, Facebook, the Cambridge Analytica story broke, and same thing. Yeah. All this data that was coming in, driven by the people manipulating the data using what was AI back then to get people to get this input and hear what they wanted to hear or hear what they wanted them to hear.
Yeah, stolen data on millions of people. And it is quite interesting the tie-in between Tucker and that actual thing that happened with Facebook, because it was all in relationship to the Trump campaign. So
absolutely. It was all the same thing. So this isn't the first time. And even to go back and dive a little bit further, there's this great show on PBS, Prime Video has it, and it's called The Trick. And
I need to watch that. I have not seen that. I need to see that.
What it's about fake news again. It's about the climate gate that happened in 2009. And what happened were these hackers came in and hacked a bunch of emails and everything. And they picked this one little segment out of an email called The Trick. And no spoiler alerts, watch the show, but they used that to manipulate and create this huge controversy that went all the way through the world. It reverberated around the world. It went all the way to Congress. It went all in, and the scientists were saying, oh, this is fraud. We don't really have global warming. They're trying to trick us and so forth. Literally set global warming back a decade.
And people still believe that, even though it was fake, people still believe it because they heard it, right?
And the facts were there. So in the end, it was found that this was fake news. In the end, we saw that Fox News settled for almost, $1 billion. In the end, they fired the guy that was out there being inflammatory. I mean, in the end, but can our system and our pocketbooks and our lives keep waiting for this kind of end game when, in the end, really the people that get hurt are the people that are involved in it at the moment. And, so when you put authentication up front, when you put authenticated intelligence up front, you eliminate that in the first place. You just get rid of it. It's autonomous, right? We want authenticated, autonomous, organizational information and transparent governance. Then you get rid of this stuff.
And Tim, I'm glad you said that keyword, autonomous, because it can't be first party. It has to be third party. It has to be autonomous, because then, as you and I were talking earlier, then it's like the fox watching the hen house.
Well, exactly. And so when you look at this, I mean, let's look at what Fox News was worried about. Speaking of the fox in the hen house, right?
Exactly.
What Fox was worried about was their bottom line, their viewership, right?
Right.
And so any of these things are always going to be driven by this profit motivation and this motivation to protect that story that people want told out there. So how can you authenticate yourself? How can you authenticate your own business? Let's look at Twitter as an example.
Just get out your checkbook. That's it.
Get out your checkbook. You're authenticated. You're good. But Beyonce, sorry, you're not good anymore. And a dozen others who, lost their blue check mark. So what was it? Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, Beyonce, Selena Gomez, Bill Gates, Justin Timberlake. Obviously, Bill Gates, sorry, Bill, you're gone. I don't like you anyway.
He didn't spend his $1,000.
Yeah. And, but what's the reality of it? The reality of it is Musk's looking at this and saying, hey, $8 a month. But if you're a verified, Twitter verified organization, it's $1,000 a month. $12,000 a year to just tweet. Really?
Wow.
Really? And let's assume that that's all good. Let's say you're fine. It comes out of the marketing budget, or it comes out of, it's $8 a month. Who cares? It's Starbucks. It's whatever. Okay. Well, then what do you do when that blue check mark is throwing out fake news? Do you exit or, nix it, or do you keep the cash flow? What do you think?
It's the same thing as Fox News. You keep your audience,
you
right?
Keep your audience. You keep your cash flows. And that gets into some of this banking stuff. So let's kind of relate that back to, about, what was it, 30 days ago or a bit more, we heard Silicon Valley Bank was failing. Then Signature Bank goes down. Now today, like First Republic is teetering. Its stock has stopped trading several times because it's falling so much. And at the end of March, a few weeks ago, we started these testimonies in front of Congress. And Michael Barr, the vice chairman of the FDIC, said, well, basically, the reason we had this is deficiencies in governance. And we didn't stress test Silicon Valley Bank. Deficiencies in governance. Okay, let's talk about that. A TAO, a Trust Autonomous Organization, or a DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, means that governance itself is autonomously being generated. It's in the code of the company. You can do these things, but you can't do these unless the members or the stakeholders within that have a vote and say, everybody knows what's going on. That's what transparency means. Insiders, you're an insider if you're a member of the DAO. For sure, you are. Right? Become a member.
If those elements would have been in for SVP Bank or any of those, they tripled in value and size, et cetera, and it just got risky. Had they had the governance in there, and the regulators are sitting here saying, hey, it was bad management and poor governance. And by the way, we didn't have the tools, or we didn't enforce even the stress test on that bank or on this banking system to see really what was the portfolio like, right? So again, you didn't have authentication of the information that was in there. You didn't have authentication of the information. Banks are the most regulated industries on the planet, and certainly in the United States. Except they need a smart contract to trigger events. They need real-time regulation because things move too fast. And as the Atlantic said about AI, you haven't seen
nothing yet. That's not exactly what they said. They said we haven't seen the worst of fake news, and we haven't seen the worst of deep fakes yet. And you haven't seen the speed at which this is all going to happen yet. So we need to start now with this idea of certification blocks. Wonder where that came from. That was the idea in 2016. Let's just certify all these blocks called BlockCerts. Let's create authentication from the outset. And, way back in 2018, we were talking about authenticated intelligence instead of authenticated ignorance, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, these are kind of the things that we're facing. Not kind of things. These are the things we're facing today. And it's economics, it's political, it's climate, it's fears of AI. Yet, if you turn that on its head, Dan, you have this great opportunity to say, well, let's just do the tweaks. That's what we do in coding. We tweak it to make it work more efficiently, right?
Right.
So the reason we walk around with cell phones in our hands, we figured out how to do it.
Right? Exactly.
We figured out how to put a computer in our hands.
Tied to a big Fortran computer.
That's right.
Back in college.
Or even a laptop. Right?
Yeah.
And so many people don't even know what Fortran is now.
Yeah, so old.
I do, though. Yeah. And it's interesting if you look at this idea of the trust autonomous organization and decentralized organizations. I think this is really an important awareness for people. Nothing starts out decentralized. We gather as human beings to create organizations. But when we want to then engage other people, whether that be team members, buyers, investors, things like that, you really need to carry that ideal and that idea forward in this form of governance. That's what we can do with blockchain technologies and smart contracts if all the pieces are there. Right. So when we built BlockCerts that's why we created this stack of Web 4.0 and all of those elements that are there, because it's not just one thing, it's iterations. You start out with something as simple as a domain. Well, right. Is it a real domain? Do you really own it? Or are you faking a brand with a misspelling? Right?
Yeah.
So
is it spoofed? Is it one letter off or one
that's right.
number off?
And many hacks happen that way. So, that was where we came up with domain certain. Then we saw this big, expansion in the NFT market. And just, a couple weeks ago, some developer, I think in Australia, came up with a way to use AI to detect images. And this has been around for a long time, but you can now detect, duplications in images. So there's a really good use of authenticated intelligence, using AI to say, well, is that a deep fake? Is it a deep fake person? Is that Elon Musk really saying that you should invest in this cryptocurrency before the SpaceX takeoffs? Those are all over YouTube. Go look.
Right. Is this real authentication or not?
Is it real? And do you have, even on YouTube, think about that for a minute. Do you have real information up there? What's the motivation of a YouTube or a Google? Get as many viewers as possible.
Right.
That's the motivation. Now, if you want to segment your market down, which few people want to do, but if you want to say that's fake, right? This is not real. Where's that disclaimer? That is fake. We could do that probably pretty easily with the technology available out there, but where's the money in it?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So until that becomes a monetization model that's not a cash grab monetization model, but it's real authentication, validated by the community, validated by the blocks of what this ongoing validation too, not just a one and done thing. I don't mean ongoing payments like $8 a month. I mean, ongoing validation. You did this transaction. It was real. You did this transaction. It was real. You did this transaction. That looks weird. Oops. Yeah. That's called an exception. And we have the data models to do all this. We have the AI to do all this. So it's not something to be feared. It's something to be friend and to use for our advantage.
Yep. Well, Tim, I know with DAOs, in the last year and a half or so, we've seen some very interesting high-profile DAOs like the U.S. Constitution. We've seen the Denver Broncos, the fans trying to acquire the Denver Broncos, a number of very high-level DAOs. But what we're seeing now is real businesses, startups, businesses that have fan bases that are doing DAOs, and DAOs have many different purposes. If it's authenticated, it's autonomous, as you just were saying, and if it's a new way to create a whole new division or a whole new business, it just gets pretty exciting what you can do with
Well,
DAOs.
it really does, and it brings in this next generation, not only of web, what we call Web 4.0, but this next generation of business. And when we built what we built over the last decade, we were building it for a next generation economic business and customer trust model. Or what I like to say is, it's not B2B, which is business to business, or B2C, which is business to consumer. It's A to B to C. Authentication to business to consumer. So we can always rely on that first point, the authentication point. And as you like to say, Dan, authentication inside, right?
Exactly.
Start there, just like you did with Intel inside in your processor and your computer. Start with processing authenticated information. You'll never have to worry or fear AI, and you'll never have to fear fake news, and you'll never have to fear what you're doing with your big decisions, whether that be a purchase or doing business with somebody or taking your hard-earned money and investing it or what have you. Those are things that will help as tools. These are tools.
Exactly. It's a new frontier, but it's exciting, the tools we have available and what is there today. And if you have an interest, please contact us at BlockCerts.com. And we're working.
You can get started by just downloading the browser, the Orbit Eye browser at BlockCerts.com, and go to domain certain and get a domain and start there. And you'll start getting these updates. We have lots of information that can take this to the next, take you to the next level of how all this works. So you go to BlockCerts.com. Become a BCert token holder and become a member of our channel here by subscribing. Thumbs up if you like this content, and learn about what trust autonomous organizations and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, are about as we reshape this and get rid of all of this fear, fakes, frauds, and get a future that we can all enjoy being in and be confident with.
Trust, truth, and transparency.
That's
all
it.
in one.
That's it. So, Dan, as I like to say now, the web is under new management. It's you. So get out there and do it. It's your web, and it should be. And BCert tokens and BlockCerts is here to make sure that that's happening every day.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll be back in another couple of weeks, and we look forward to the next iteration of this. So thanks.
That's Tim. Right. And we've got some blogs out there and our podcast and so forth. So look for us on Trustonomics or on your favorite podcast service. And we'll have a new podcast out next week, Dan, to talk about this in more depth.
That's correct. Great. Thanks,
everybody.
Tim. Thanks for joining us, everybody.